All right, so we have a fair few questions. Some are directed at individuals and some the panel. I think we might start with a bit of a panel question right now. I love this one. What advice would you give your younger self, and would you have listened to that advice? And that comes from Holly. Who wants to start? Yeah. Left or right? Let's go.
Thanks for the question, Holly, and that's a really great question. I think I touched a bit on this in my presentation, but I think trusting yourself and believing in the journey as opposed to the destination is probably what I would say to my younger self, and something that I really have tried to focus on doing a little bit more even as I get a bit older, because I think we actually don't really know where we're going. And you know, perhaps a couple of generations ago, you'd get into one career path in one industry and you'd keep climbing up the ladder. But now, I think Alison spoke about the fact that she had, 9 different careers or jobs by the time she turned 30. And my professional experience perhaps hasn't been quite that diverse, but I think we are all on our pathway and expect that to change over the course of our career.
Is this one working? Well, like I was just trying to finish on my presentation, which is that I think that it's natural and it's normal that I did this, which is I was fitting into the box as a mathematician, not necessarily the outside. Think of like the way I was thinking, and I've been, what's it called, when you're indoctrinated by my mathematical community to work with equations the way I was told, which is normal, and this is before diversity was trendy, whereas now I really think that I should have had the guts or felt more confident in expressing my mathematics, like I was showing you with those diagrams, which is finding more of my truth in what I'm doing and celebrating it and screaming it from the rooftops, louder, louder, which I'll be doing soon. Watch out.
Dr. Ball.
I think there's a couple of key things here that reflect a lot on everyone's conversations. My first one is go where you are celebrated, not where you are tolerated. Go where you're celebrated. This doesn't mean that you get rose petals thrown at you every morning. This means that you don't have the barriers or the rub that we've been having, and it really depresses me when 15 years later, after everything that I went through in working inside engineering consulting firms, people are still having the same issues. And I think that was one of the major things that made me cry in the Barbie movie, was at the very beginning this sense of hope. We've changed everything, we've fixed everything, and then when you left doll world and entered the real world, you're like, actually no, we haven't fixed everything, and no, everything isn't right. Just to tell you a bit of my personal background around that is I won the Queensland Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. I just got the Boss Young Execs, one of the top 6. 2015 was a quite superlative year. And I got made redundant during a merger and acquisition. Because there's no time that a woman in an engineering consulting firm is more vulnerable than when there's a merger acquisition or a chop happening. Now, the marketing team apparently was screaming blue murder, don't let her go, don't let her go. And I was a hot prospect to win the national. I ended up winning the National Corporate Businesswoman of the Year in 2015. But I did it when I was already redundant. And I didn't tell people I'd been made redundant. I stood and did the photos. I stood and did the newspaper articles in the Courier Mail. And the company that made me redundant, that acquired the company that I'd been doing all of the drone research work with, quite happily took the sunshine. And they agreed that any media that would come in, they would direct it to me. Friends of mine that were journalists would call in to ask to speak to me, and they would never pass it on to me. Now that man, whenever I see him, and this is where we all have power in these situations, he has no idea what's going to come out of my mouth whenever I see him. So whenever I'm in Brisbane and at one of these events and I'm sat there and the Premier knows me and she'll be like, oh, hi Catherine. I'll be like, all right, Anastasia. He might be sat on one of the big tables and stuff and he has no clue what I'm about to do. And that for me, knowledge is power, right? So being made redundant, I woke up, and in the middle of the night, I went to the loo and I stood there shaking, physically shaking in front of the mirror, and I got quite emotional and I sort of said to myself, this, remember this. This is what it feels like when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. And I decided then and there that no mediocre man that I would never hire is ever going to have that level of control over my career again. So go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Does not come from this, oh, I want to be loved, I want to be loved. No. You go to the places where they value your contribution and they respect your contribution, or you walk out of that door and you find somewhere that does. And if you're not sure, you call me.
Would love you to be on our side in an argument at any time. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine Ball. Alison, obviously you're still quite young, but still the same question if you maybe were to talk to your 12-year-old self.
12-year-old's pretty young. It's probably still just painting or like colouring in or something. I think for me, the most important thing is to be able to push against the norm. So again, we live in a society that traditionally was established by, male-dominated industries and things like that. And the main thing that I've learned over the past 5+ years is that just because it's uncomfortable and just because certain people don't approve doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. So I mentioned before about engineering standards. Every single Australian standard that exists is used to try and simplify a complex problem, right? It's trying to make you say, all right, I want to build this bridge, here's how you do it, follow the rules. What I would say is shred the rules and figure it out from scratch every single time. So push against the norm, figure out what works for you, find where you fit, and also sometimes find where you don't fit and push against the norm, because that's also a bit of fun. And like I said, have a small but tight community around you that you can trust will give you honest opinions if you are pushing the dial a little bit too much potentially and not getting your messaging out there, but also people who will advocate for you, push you up, make sure that you have that confidence that you need to do it.
Beautiful. Thank you for your answer. And Amanda?
I think for me, I probably come from a very different background and not as much of a strongly educated background. So I guess I want to put the messaging out there that it was okay to be a young mum and also to be not a mainstream learner, because those were two big things for my life journey. And I'm really sad that the Young Mums, Strong Mums program couldn't be here today, because they were supposed to, but unfortunately there's some yummy tummy bugs going around. But that particular program I think is so inspiring that we're putting funding into mums to be able to get educated, because at the time I didn't appreciate education because I didn't fit into mainstream schooling or mainstream thinking. So I disengaged from school and end up being a young mum. But I'm really proud that there's now programs, which my daughter's actually going to be a part of, where you can be surrounded and have a network of other young mums to learn and grow with. So I think if you end up in that space, just to know that it's okay and that there is still plenty of time to create a really amazing career, and your kids will become your inspiration. And if you're an alternative learner, I love that ADHD is being labelled the new superpower, because I could never understand why I needed 20,000 projects to be working on at once, but that's because that's the way my brain works. And I just think for all the different learners and for the young mums, you've got this.
Oh, you're such an inspiration, Amanda. Thank you so much. And 4 kids as well. Amazing. You're such an inspiration. All right, we have a few questions. I'd like to ask Alison this one. This one comes from Rebecca. If a co-worker puts down others for their own benefit and it impacts career progression, how do we prove ourselves without giving 110%? How do we convince ourselves that we are worthy?
I think I'll flip that question on its head a little bit. Firstly, the prove yourself. I don't actually think that's terminology that we should always be pushing for, right? Because why are we proving ourselves? We're trying to prove ourselves to others. Why does another person's opinion matter? Because you want to be accepted. To your point before, where are you accepted is where it matters the most. So I think in my personal experience, it's that piece of self-reflection. So analysing both what your motives are and what the motives of the people around you are, so that you can better understand how that impacts your professional development is really important. So again, going back to that example of a company that I used to work for, I had a mix of really strong advocates who were, pushing you to accelerate and be top of your class, all that sort of shebang. And then I had that contradictory force of I guess, fundamental jealousy, but also fundamentally saying, we don't understand you, so we're going to push back on you, right? When people don't understand things, that's usually when they get uncomfortable and can get quite upset. So what I would recommend if you are a professional in industry is to, one, like I said, have that level of self-awareness. And as much as people say you have to find it within yourself, it's a lot easier to have people who you can ask about it. So have someone who you trust, who can support you honestly with non-biased feedback is also important, to tell you when you're in theory right or wrong. The second piece is having that courage to push against, like I said, all of the social norms. I'm pretty confident I'm going to be continuing to do that throughout my career, regardless if I start going to grow some seaweed or building pyrolysis plants around the world and all that. But having that courage is super important, but it's not natural for most people. I identify as a bit of an introvert, which some people wouldn't believe. I'm probably gonna have a nap after this event. So that courage, again, comes from within, but it also comes from your network. So just find where you fit, support yourself, and always analyse what's going on around you.
Yes, beautiful answer. Thank you. We're going to be jumping around a little bit. Obviously, the industries are very different. So, Dr. Ball, this one's for you from Zavira. How have you navigated the gender bias in the boardroom or landscape you have had to navigate? Can you give some tips for women who are in these situations? This will be good.
Oh, thank you, Safira. Oh my gosh. Okay. An AICD report done a couple of years ago showed that fewer than 3% of Australian company directors had formalised STEM qualifications. So let's just hold that as a diversity metric for a start. Juxtapose that with the fact that 90% of global GDP is now digitised. Do we have a board diversity issue? Did I even mention the word gender? Right? So boards in Australia, I think, are in for a bit of a rude awakening. The federal government is already starting different mechanisms to look at how boards actually treat cyber threats. So that if you didn't know, this whole push around cyber threats will be that people will get fired for clicking on those dodgy links. Like before now, it might have been an education thing, but you will lose your job if you cause a cyber attack against a company because the implications for them is huge. Boards are sitting there with a lack of gender diversity that I don't see changing unless we actually put formalised quotas in. But I also think we need formalised quotas around people with STEM qualifications rather than lame qualifications. When I say lame, I mean law, accounting, management and economics. So it sounds a bit aggressive, but I didn't mean it like that. And that's not my terminology. It's the lames versus the stems, right? But in fact, as we've talked about today, all of this is interdisciplinary. Just because you've done a law degree and maybe you're really good at languages doesn't mean that you're not good at maths. It just wasn't the pathway that you found in school or university at the time. You didn't get a chance to boomerang back a year to pick up something that you originally weren't sure that you loved. So how do we start looking at the full value of a board in terms of its diversity? I've held a couple of board positions. I've got lots of international advisory positions. One of the biggest things I'd say about anyone looking at a board career is that it's incredibly litigious. It's incredibly draining in terms of time and energy, and you have to really care about the reason why you want to be on that board. It can put a legal sword of Damocles over your head. If you're not familiar with the term sword of Damocles, I love this expression. So just imagine there was a king called Damocles, and everyone wanted the throne, and he said, it's okay, if you want to have my throne, you can have my throne, but in order to sit on this throne, you have to have my sword hanging above your head at all times by one of my head hairs. That's the sword of Damocles. At any point, the sword can drop and you're done. And so the way the world is shifting and the way our boards are set up using the Corporations Act means the only thing that really you can get in trouble for as a board is fiduciary duty, financial management. If you trade insolvently, that's the only thing they'll care about. Now, unfortunately, what that doesn't mean that boards have innovation committees. So they'll have risk committees, but not innovation committees. But those of us know that lack of innovation is actually a risk. There's actually a cost to not innovating. When I've been on formalised boards in the past or even sat and looked, the one piece of advice I'll give you about boards is the same about any kind of job that you go for or any kind of group that you might be joining or any kind of advisory group that might want you to be there and add value. Whenever you get interviewed for anything in your life, you are interviewing them. You are interviewing them. Thank you. You get it. There's some people here, we get it, right? I think as a person going through engineering consulting firms, I used to feel grateful that I had a job. You know, so now I might not be wanted by people in Brisbane, but NASA are on the phone. So, I mean, where do you go? Isn't it? You know, Maramba or the moon? You're like, where do you want to go? So, not that I've got anything against Maramba or Central West Queensland or Central Queensland, I love it. I've got good friends there. So the key here about board diversity is the same thing about C-suite diversity, it's the same thing about management diversity, it's the same thing about team diversity, it's the same thing about graduate hire diversity. Diversity is more than just gender, it's an actual demonstration of and a distillation of the culture of that entity that you're working with. So when you get approached for a board position, I really highly suggest you get some formal governance training. Now that's either through your workplace with various governance training that you might be able to access through internal education processes, or it might be through a third-party organisation like the AICD. Now I've done the AIC Directors course because I was running my own businesses, and so I needed to know what my own risks were when I was running my companies. The AICD course for me, though, with my breadth of already running my own businesses, the only thing that was worth it was the finance day, where I learned how much Australian legislation was put in place just to stop Alan Bond. That was the sole purpose. I gained something from it. I gained a network from it. You get the GAICD on it. And if you're serious about board positions, you need to be serious about your own self-education, about what that risk is to you and the opportunity is to your career. I never look at anything now without recognizing, why do they want me? So if someone's approaching you for something, Groucho Marx, this comedian from the 1970s, used to say, I would never be a member of a club that would have me. Because what do you want? What do you see in me that you want? What connections do you want? What brain parts do you want? What am I a diversity hire? Why do you want me? What's the culture of that organization? So if you're currently sitting on a board and you're not feeling like you're getting what you want from it, quit. When you are being asked to join a board, make sure you've got director's insurance so they can't come for your house and for you. And get yourself educated with governance, and then through that AICD or other governance, there's other formalised education around governance, ask these questions about diversity and ask these questions and ask them of diverse people around the room, not just those of us that carry some of the D&I work. Sorry, I've gone on a bit there because of my own personal experience. But it's really, yeah, feel empowered to walk away and say no. It's nothing better than being offered something and saying, sorry, no, can't do it.
Hope that answered your question, Severa.
Question, Sophia.
This one is for the M in STEAM. So question from Renee for you, Dr. Cresswell. Girl math is becoming a bit of a joke on socials lately.
Is it?
What, do you not know about girl math?
No.
Okay, so I don't have TikTok, but it's trending apparently on TikTok, but I didn't know as well.
Just describe it quickly.
I will.
Oh.
In the latest viral TikTok trend, young women are explaining money habits or spending choices that make no mathematical sense, such as if you buy anything that costs less than $5, it isn't real money because at that price it's practically free.
This is funny. I'm loving this. So it's like funny maths.
Yeah, there's this other one. Once when I forgot to return an item in time to get a refund, I put myself on a spending freeze. In my head, I sort of got that money back because I wasn't spending on new clothes. So I guess it's justifying.
Well, I'm just trying to see who's putting. Is it girls that are making these videos?
Yes.
But they're leaning into the patriarchy. They are. But I also think, it's interesting how all of us here are I think it's a great panel, by the way, because we're all very different we're very diverse. Talk about diverse women, you can see all our different personalities. So she's already jumping out of the chair, just going, patriarchy, patriarchy! She's ready to get the sword of Damocles, and she's going to be swiping yeah. Whereas I'm a more... Well, I don't like TikTok, but, I understand that I don't want to stop if young people are finding this, it's not mathematics. Well, I see another side to this. What I see is exactly what I've been trying to talk about, which is that they're not talking about maths anyway, are they? They're showing the emotion and the bias held in how you use or are interpreting the maths. the numbers are the same. Whatever you paid for the shoes, or I don't know what, is the same. It's how you then coat it with your context. So the negative side, or the, yes, it's hammering on about a stereotype, but we do that every day, and I don't know if society is ready to break all stereotypes just yet. So
Yeah, yes.
I thought that was quite funny.
Thank you very much. Well, we've all been educated on what girl math is now.
I should do some girl maths?
Yeah.
Give me an idea. Yeah, but that is girl maths, but you've got to find an angle. Oh, I've had sex with... How many times I've sex... Well, I am famous for the 12 bonk rule, but...
All right.
What's the 12 bonk rule?
Sorry, it was inappropriate for this audience.
Look, we've actually
I was told to keep it appropriate.
We've actually
it's
got
not.
some-
It's in fact based. I'm now realising, now that I'm brainstorming. Okay, I'll do a TikTok video on 12 bonk rule.
Excellent. We've got some fantastic questions coming through, and being mindful, we've only got about 10 minutes left. This one's just come through from Tara, and it could any of you could address this. Do you think the future of STEAM careers is actually going to be centred on transferable skills, soft skills, lived experience, rather than tertiary quals, given the pace of the industry changes? Amanda.
It makes me feel very accepted hearing that question, if anything. I don't know. I did end up going and getting my certificates like everyone else, because I was told by my local council at the time when I was running my childcare centre that I couldn't have a pay rise without a ticket. But for me at the time, I had already cleaned up a $30,000 debt. I'd got better accreditation than the previous manager, who was amazing, had amazing skills, had 10 years of experience in the job, and I had one. But even though I had all those transferable skills, it didn't count for anything because I didn't have that ticket, which broke me. And our council actually had to wait before the chairperson went away. I hope this is probably going to be live, but anyway. To then be able to empower me to have a $2 pay rise when I agreed to start there on the bare minimum, because I didn't have a formal education. I was a young mum, and I basically taught myself everything, but was still left to feel like a lesser person because I hadn't finished my qualifications and I didn't have a ticket to say that I had the skills to do what I did. So I hope that in the future that this space does change and has more, and I think it already is changing. I think we're all blessed to be on the spectrum, just some of us more than others, and we all have different ways of learning and living and doing things. And I may not have the best literacy skills, but team me up with one of these ladies that have great literacy skills and we make the perfect team. So I think it's really important that we do diversify that and we allow people in that way, so that...
Yeah, no, that was perfect. Thank you. Jasmine actually asked that question, but Tara's is very similar. Do qualifications outweigh experience when applying for a role with within the STEAM fields? As a young mum with 4 children, study hasn't been an option. I find women like me are pushed aside as uneducated.
Okay, so skills and aptitude are the new qualifications. So there's a whole role now about testing people for their aptitude, and this is again taking away the silos that we've all been forced into. Like when I studied environmental science at Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England, you had to choose environmental science or marine biology. 2 completely different buildings, completely different sets of professors. I'm like, since where in the world is there this line, this glass wall in between environment and marine? It doesn't exist, right? The edicts, the rules, the way in which we sample things, the ecology, the maths, the GIS, all of these things are without borders, but academically you're shoving people into marine biology or environmental science. It made no sense to me. There is an Australian company called With You, With Me, which you may have heard of. They do a lot of work with veterans, and one of the first things they started doing, they're working in DC, they've gone gangbusters in the US, they put these veterans through aptitude assessments to see who was actually going to be a better cybersecurity analyst than others. And in fact, some of the key traits that they started looking for in people are the abilities, really, that people might call soft skills, which is such a denigrating term to a very complex set of emotional quotient and adaptability quotient that are typically formalized around women's skills, social skills. So they've now started looking at, can we look at women in the over 50s that are typically in admin roles who, when the automation starts to scale, are going to be the first to be replaced by technology. And I'm going to do that inside the finger things because I don't actually think anyone's going to get replaced by technology. But what they've done there is then identify the key skills that people have and the aptitude that they carry to be a good cybersecurity analyst. You don't have to be able to write code. You have to understand process. You have to understand systems. You have to understand people. Find me an admin woman in her 60s that isn't all over that, and the office gossip, and the politics, and the layers of who's good at what, and who they would ask to do this, that, and the other, and all of the adaptability that that person has seen in her 40-year career. Going paperless, going through digital transformation. Like that kind of person has gone through so much technological change. They are absolutely spot on for cybersecurity jobs in Australia. So I think that we're moving, yes, education will always be important in terms of formalised qualifications, but like I talked earlier about my AI scalping and the AI searching and the AI filters on top of these large language models, you start scraping information and data from inside the systems that typically women won't apply for a job until they think they can tick all 10 things that are asked for. Men will go for when there's 3 or 4. Now it won't even be down to you because your digital doppelganger will already tell the recruitment agent that you already fly past 12 of them. And so technology will start, I think, helping recognise some of the skills that we might not have a bachelor's of science in, or we might not have a micro qualification in. Or you show me a woman who's got children when they had them when they were particularly young that had to eradicate $30,000 worth of debt, keep themselves employed, keep themselves fed, housed, who can't project manage a really complex system of festivals or events or
Such a good point, yes.
And so the technology will assist with this because it will start allowing us to scrape some of that skills and aptitude and allowing us to have quasi qualifications based on real world experience. And I'm an academic and I'm saying the universities don't want to let you go. We love you. We want you to come back to us. But universities need to shake it up because they are not accelerating in the way that these technologies are too. That's a whole other conversation. I'm passing my mic, take it off me.
I'll just quickly add, yes, that's something that I'm seeing too, that unfortunately you need the skills, and I'm crying on the inside at the moment because everyone's talking about AI. No one actually understands. It is mathematics, but to understand the maths, like I'm thinking of doing, only in the last week, I'm studying the maths behind it, and I'm getting hives because it's shitty maths. But it's a very powerful, it's a powerful tool, but yeah. So for me, I mean, you can see we come from different backgrounds, but I'm quite passionate about an educated community that's knowing where it's going in the future and what is going to be the power of AI and why. What is it, instead of just going, oh yeah, great, it can, drag data out of a pile of data. What is it actually doing when it's doing that? I don't know, I just had to add education.
Let me know if you need to see a skin doctor about your hives at any point.
Perfect. This one is actually for you, Dr. Cox. This is from Erin. What was your experience as a young Australian woman studying public health in the UK? What challenges did you get and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Great question. I honestly can say that the opportunity to study at Oxford was probably the most transformational opportunity and experience I've ever had in my life. And I would speak to the academic opportunities, but also to the social and the cultural opportunities. I spoke earlier today about my swimming pursuits, and I can absolutely say that there is no way that I would have had the opportunity to swim and work towards a number of big swims that really put me into this international open water swimming community. There's no way that that would have happened unless I had the opportunity to actually study at Oxford and live in the UK. Although I will say that Oxford is officially the most landlocked city in the UK, so I don't know about that as the best choice in terms of the endless commute to the various different bodies of ocean. But I will say as well, I think I hadn't even been overseas until the age of 21, and so the prospect of only a couple of years later moving to the UK was as overwhelming as, I mean, I was very fortunate. I won this fancy scholarship and I had a lot of support and had obviously done very well academically, and I knew that I could do the work, and I was very motivated to have an academic and educational experience that could not really be provided for me here in Australia. But it was incredibly overwhelming, and I think, again, just to go back to what I talked about in my presentation, you have to believe that you can take these opportunities. You won't win a Monash scholarship unless you submit an application to the General Sir John Monash Foundation. And I think it starts with believing that you can work towards these opportunities, even if your parents had never even been overseas before. And I was very fortunate that I had supportive parents, but I didn't have parents that could, I guess, give me that level of mentorship and leadership and guidance. So for me, Oxford is now, on reflection, a bit of a dream and a blur, but something that has been absolutely transformational and foundational in who I am as a person, and is much more than I guess the shift in career and the international global health dermatologists that I now have the opportunity to work with, and that skill set and vision that I've brought home to Australia. For me, I guess that's really easy to speak about, but the experience is much more than that, and hopefully some of you in this room will have either had that experience in your career or perhaps something that you can work towards.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cox. Okay, we're going to wrap it up with one final question for the panel. How do you see the future landscape of STEAM careers evolving over the next decade? Alison?
I think I'll start, and I might piss off a few people with the start of it. I think even talking about LAME, for example, as well, STEAM used to be STEM. Let's start there. We always label everything whenever it comes to anything systematic that we want to change throughout society, because labels are easy and rules are easy, and the reason why we have qualifications is because it's an easy box for the HR person to tick. Half the time they're not going to get an interview, the other half of the time you do, and you're probably not even talking to the person who's going to be your boss. It's just going to be some other random that you never speak to again. So in terms of what's going to happen in the future, I think a lot of these acronyms and like abbreviations and like how we assess worth are going to get scrapped, because we're going to have this amazing things like artificial intelligence or like an approach to mathematics that will be able to explain things in other ways that everyone can understand, with 5 different perspectives. So you have the same topic with 5 different presentations. So we won't need that systematic, here's an abbreviation and this is what it all stands for. And as an engineer, I hate them, because we have like repositories of like hundreds of pages of abbreviations. You have the same abbreviation that means 5 different things, and it just doesn't make sense anymore, right? I'm sure it's the same in government. So for me, it's going to be a small change, but eventually there will be a big shift in terms of how we present ourselves, how we value, and how we integrate ourselves into the workforce and society.
Thinking about the A and that being incorporated now, I see bigger collaborations, because while all these amazing brains create all these amazing things, we make them palatable to the community. So I'm sure we will become more and more integrated.
There's a couple of things to hook onto here. The future is transdisciplinary, okay? We know that already. The education system, if there's any teachers in the room, you know this already. A lot of the curricula that you're seeing come through, yes, it's still traditionally siloed, but the answer to a lot of the future readiness aspects of the current Australian national curriculum and various other teaching curricula that we look at around the world is, how do we future readiness? And I don't like the word future-proof, because you can't proof yourself against something that's inevitable, right? The future, whoop, there it went. Okay, there it goes. Okay, it's constantly in flux. And so to future readiness yourself and the kids that are in school today, it's multidisciplinary interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, diverse teams working on well-defined problems. I think if we could do one thing with our formalised and informal education systems, it's actually to spend more time actually identifying the problem rather than immediately trying to find the solution. And so some of the best things that we can look at going forwards in terms of the Australian economy, we might yet have an Inflation Reduction Act similar to the US in terms of green tech, clean tech, climate change. There's been a call from the ATSI today and various other leading engineers and technology experts around how we can get to carbon zero as a country by 2035 if we really put our minds to it and use the technologies that we know. Australia, the University of New South Wales, we created the technology that's in every single solar panel on the planet, but we didn't capitalize on it. We gave it away. That could have been our oil money, that solar panel money. We gave it away. We've always been great at the R&D, terrible at the C. The other thing that is definitely going to be part of Australia's future is the Artemis program. It is the return to space. It is the fact we actually have an environmental science issue in low Earth orbit and various other orbits. We have so much space junk going around up there. There will be a conflict over the resources on the moon in the next 15 years. There will be a conflict on racing to Mars in the next 15 years. And the human habitation of some of these resources that are off-world or off-planet will all require politics, soft skills, human diplomacy, language, culture, people that may be diaspora that are living in Australia, ways in which we can reach out through our globalized society that we really are, our defense friendships like Quad, which is Japan, India, the US and Australia will probably be our most important defense relationship. Everyone keeps going on about AUKUS. These multinational, multidisciplinary projects are absolutely key to our economic development. Tie that in with green tech, tie that in with ag tech, tie that in with med tech, tie that in with fintech and prop tech. What we've got then is this idea of everything is going to be digitized. It's just whether you see that or not when you're accessing it. And so from the food that we eat, which literally CRISPR technology is now changing single genes to help climate change ready some of these crops that we rely on to feed the world, all the way through to how we protect provenance and some of the natural vegetation and flora and fauna of Australia against a globalized market. It all comes down to having diverse teams like this around the table, identifying that problem and then finding that solution. And that's, could it be on Mars? Could it be here in Northern Territory? Actually doesn't really matter. It's that fundamental ability to have people from different backgrounds working together to solve a well-identified problem.
To build, yes, so for me this whole interdisciplinary thing has been, I mean my whole career at a university has been deans saying to me, you know, yeah, you've done all this amazing stuff, but there's no code. You don't fit within this silo. And I'm looking forward to the impact of my next book. That's really going to piss them off. Oh, I always get called to meetings and like, so on the one hand you have meetings where they're like, we want interdisciplinary research, but there is no formal pathways where then they call me to other meetings and go, but you don't fit the codes, where there's no code, because everything you do, like if you do a differential equation or a graph theory, so there's different parts of mathematics and they all have a code. And I'm in the mathematics department, but what I do doesn't fit a code. So on the one hand, they want the interdisciplinary, but there's no code. And I'm scared. Righto. I know.
Yes, we've got to get her off to the airport. Thank you so much, Dr. Catherine Ball.
I wanted her input on this because I really do think, I'm scared because I think that university, I saw that Google is now having some training. I think that these big groups like Google, Amazon are going to start their own educational institutions with less codes, and because there's certain aspects of academia where we're really falling behind, and it's so far behind now that I think, because I do think that the future is all interdisciplinary diversity, where we're all celebrating our sides to things. And why I think maths is so important is because maths is not culture dependent. And so we can really start these discussions because it's revolving around something so concrete. Maths plug.
Thank you so much. All right, that is all that we have time for. So can we please have a big round of applause once more. Dr. Victoria Cox, Dr. Catherine Ball that just left us, Amanda Stevenson, Alison Jugard and Dr. Cleo Cresswell. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.